okay?
Everything's good. Winter has ended here. So it's a beautiful time of year.
Nice.
What are the questions this morning?
Yeah, let me just get the recording started and then we can go ahead and take the questions. Okay. Krishna Das, you want to go ahead and ask your question?
Dandavats. Good morning, Guru Maharaj.
Morning.
So my question is regarding, I guess, clarification on understanding Grihastha ashram and eligibility for making advancement. So I've heard from Srila Prabhupada, and Padmanabha Maharaj, I think, also echoed this point in one of his recent talks about how making advancement and attaining the goal of bhakti isn't necessarily dependent on having to change one's ashram from grihastha to renunciate. That it's really open to anybody in any position in any of the ashrams. But sometimes I've heard in the Shastra, it seems like it makes kind of a different point. And in particular, I remember in your book, Sri Guru Parampara, there's a sentence that mentions Radha Krishna Goswami's 17th century Sadhana Deepika cites renunciation of household life as a prerequisite for entering the mysteries of manjari-bhava. So I was wondering if you could kind of clarify that and harmonize the points that I was bringing up.
Well, I think that it's clear that there is a marked distinction between the bhakti marg and the gyan marg, yoga marg, in that gyan and yoga are governed by sattva guna, which unto itself doesn't have the power to afford one entrance into transcendence. When there's some admixture of bhakti, then they're efficacious in the full sense of their aim. So, by contrast, bhakti being governed by the nirguna, the transcendental status, is more powerful. And as such, the requirement within jnana and yoga, as those paths classically teach, the requirement of brahmacharya or sexual abstinence does not apply to bhakti. And one doesn't need to be a celibate in order to practice bhakti because of the power of bhakti. And to unto itself, to deliver one from the chains that, in one sense, bind us to the material world, the attraction between the sexes. That's what makes the world go round, right? And that's the world we don't want to, that we want to get out of. We want to get off the Ferris wheel, if you will, of merry-go-round. It's not so merry, the unmerry-go-round of samsara. So, therefore, for example, also we have a description in the Bhagavatam of lokas, realms, that are not transcendent, but are exclusively set up to facilitate the pursuance of transcendence and are attained by celibates. Something like in Buddhism, we have the forget the name, but there's a place that some Buddhists can go to where everyone's has a Buddha nature, and from there it's easy to go to nirvana. So Tapalok, Siddhalok, and so on and so forth. These are places where the entire focus of the realm is spiritual practice, and so celibates are said to attain such realms. So there's no getting around the fact that attraction, I guess I say, makes the world go round, and therefore overcoming that is, you're 50% of the way there, so to speak. But then again, the best means to acquire that is bhakti. So while one doesn't have to be a celibate to practice bhakti, bhakti is the best means by which one can overcome the attraction to between the sexes by way of attracting us to Radha and Krishna, and engaging us and participating in the satisfaction of their senses. So the attraction has to be overcome, but the best means to do it is bhakti, which doesn't require that it's overcome in order to start. And statements like the one that you cited from my book, a quotation of Radha Krishna Goswami, who was a householder, are emphasizing, I would say, the higher stages of spiritual practice, which requires greater eligibility, like Lila Smaranam, for example. To sit and do Lila Smaranam on the uppercut Lila is something that's to do effectively requires a pure heart. And the means to get a pure heart is bhakti. As the heart becomes purified by bhakti, Cheto Darpana Marjana, one gains greater qualification to participate in bhakti and in practices thereby that require greater eligibility. And it's very practical, the greater eligibility. How should you do your sadhana? How should you count your rounds? Well, like you count your money. How carefully do you count your money? Are you thinking of something else while you're counting your money? No. No. So, and we have a very good example there, how to practice, right? But because we don't chant our rounds, for example, like and count our rounds, if you will, to use the analogy, like we count our money. We don't, because our heart is somewhere else. It's in our money. So we don't know that the wealth is in Goloka. Golokero Premodhan Harinam Sankirtan. It's been exported from there, the wealth of Golok, through the medium of Nam Sankirtan. But we don't understand that. So we pay more attention to our money because we think that's going to maintain us, that's going to take care of us, that's going to make our life all that it could be. So the point being that when other desires are still present in our hearts, anarthas, then it's impractical for us to sit and effectively meditate on the highest ideal, and through such meditation, enter into it, come out, enter back in, which is what Lila Smaranam is really about. Anyone can kind of remember the pastimes of Krishna by reciting them and so forth, but to meditate on them deeply and engage in Lila Smaranam effectively as a practice, well, that as I say, requires greater eligibility. So I think the Goswami is emphasizing that one has to have transcended, and this is his particular focus. And Bhaktivinoda has a similar emphasis. Others have there's a tendency to have an emphasis on this practice in earlier stages. And some are advocating this practice is really meant for a person who are have attained higher stages, like ruchi, asakti, which are stages of sadhana bhakti. When they can effectively engage in such lila smarana. Bhaktivinoda Thakur gives a very practical idea. He says, well, without taste, that you won't be able to endure, you won't be able to consistently and effectively participate in that, because you have a taste for something else, so you'll be drawn to that. So I think that he's emphasizing the necessity for greater adhikar, and by way of saying that if you've gotten this far, that you've transcended the attraction between the sexes, you, in the context of bhakti, you're arguably in a position to be able to effectively participate in such lila smaranam of manjari-bhava. And of course, manjari-bhava deals with the romanticism, the eroticism, transcendental eroticism of Radha and Krishna, which shouldn't be conflated with the mundane eroticism. So I think, given the emphasis on the transcendental erotic, he's contrasting that with the mundane erotic and so on. So it doesn't mean that one has to give up one's wife and husband and so forth, but the attraction that binds them needs to be transcended. Does that help?
Yes, that is very helpful. Thank you, Guru Maharaj.
Okay. Are you getting married soon, or what? What's going on?
No, just
Not yet.
wouldn't understand it. Yeah.
He's
Okay.
available.
Sajjan, you were not.
Get him before Krishna grabs him.
Dandavats Maharaj.
Can't hear you, Sajjan. We see your
Oh.
mouth moving.
Okay, one moment.
I can hear him.
I can't.
Did you click on the English when you?
I did. Can you hear me now, Maharaj?
Yes. Good morning.
Oh, good, good. Dandavats Maharaj. So, just as previously, some months ago, I was reading with very great interest the Nityananda Charitamrita, and I asked you your particular impressions on that at that time. Currently, I'm approaching the conclusion of studying with very great interest the Sri Caitanya-Carita of Sri Murari Gupta Mahashaya. And I think I even saw a copy of it on your bookshelf, like in your room there. Did you?
Yeah.
Yes, yes. And it's very, very illuminating and educational as well. And I was wondering if you had any particular impressions about that book.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's the original biographical whatever text on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu that was written during while Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was still in the world. So all of the other similar works, Chaitanya Bhagavad, Chaitanya Nataka, Chaitanya Charitamrita, they're all afterthoughts, right? And by authors who had very little, like Kavi Karnapur as an infant, as a child, or none, like Krishnadas Kaviraj, Vrindavan Thakur, association directly with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. They're just coming just after his passing. Vrindavan Das, I believe, was the last disciple of Nityananda Prabhu, direct disciple, but he never met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Neither Krishnadas Kaviraj. So, and there are many other less well-known texts that are in biographical notes on Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's life, or books about Gaur Leela, however you want to think about that. But this is unique about Murari Gupta's work. Number one, he was a close associate personally of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as an adult and an elder, also, although a schoolmate, classmate, but older. So none of the other biographers have that. Mm, and another point is, again, that it was written during the lifetime of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu while he was present in the world. Thirdly, it's written in Sanskrit, whereas the others are all written in Bengali. So he was a scholar. Not that others weren't necessarily, but it's the only such text that I know that's written in Sanskrit. So you want to look at themes or leelas or information about Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, details about his life that are found in other texts, and maybe check them with Murari Gupta. You can see where poets, authors may have embellished the leela with different details to bring out certain points that they are particularly focused on, that they want to bring out in their text. They're looking at Chaitanya Mahaprabhu from a certain angle and want to bring that, like Krishnadas Kaviraj is looking, how does Rupa Goswami see Chaitanya Mahaprabhu? I want to bring entirely that picture out. And so you may adjust details, add or subtract, to bring out that side and so forth. Whereas, Murari Gupta, you could arguably say, well, here's a first-hand source. Now, Krishnadas Kaviraj says he's a second-hand source, and his first-hand source is Bhagavatas Goswami, Swarup Damodar. That's pretty close. But they are also talking, the emphasis there, of course, is the later Leelas in Caitanya-Carita-Mahakavya, where Raghunath Goswami resided with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu as an ascetic and so forth. And Murari Gupta is like Vrindavan Das Thakur, but earlier than him, a resident of Navadvip. Navadvip is where we want to go. Puri Leela is to help us to enter into the Navadvip Leela. So we can also look at Murari's book in that regard, and draw inspiration from that side as the ideal, from a first-hand witness. So those are some thoughts.
Yes. Oh, thank you, wonderful. I one of the things I love most about it is Sri Murari Gupta seems to give equal time, so to speak, to Madhurya Bhav and Sakyarasa, and even appreciation of Mahaprabhu being Narayan is presented in that particular text.
Well, that reminds me of the fact that Murari Gupta, of course, is said by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to come to him from Ram Leela, Hanuman. There are deities also of Murari Gupta in Vrindavan being worshipped today. I think they have Murari Gupta written on them, Gauranitai deities that he worshipped. He worshipped Gauranitai deities. And those Gauranitai deities, I think Nityananda Prabhu was carrying them, or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, a bow. And there's some aspect of Ram entering into the Gaur Nityananda, and those deities are worshipped in Sakyarasa. The lineage in which their worship was carried out, those deities were found and they're worshipped by devotees in Sakyarasa to this day. Their temple, small temple, has been updated, and some money has been donated by the international community over more recent times to give more attention to it. But you're not going to find a strong emphasis on manjari-bhava, perhaps comparatively from Murari Gupta compared to Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami. And given his own position there, coming from another Leela, being Hanuman, if you will, Mahaprabhu wrote Ram Das on his head, I think on his forehead. Beautiful
Yes.
glorification of Murari Gupta and Caitanya-Carita-Mahakavya from the mouth of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu through the pen of Krishnadas Kaviraj. Extremely, it's very touching. You might want to look into that. It's very, very how he's introducing Murari to other devotees in Jagannath Puri and what he says about him, how he feels about him, and so forth. So there is some emphasis on the breadth, if you will, of Chaitanya Leela, all-encompassing, from whatever position you might want to attain in the Paravyom. You do well to go there through Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Swami Bhagwan, right?
Yes.
Beautiful, very beautiful.
Yes. Thank you so much, Maharaj.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay, Ganga Shakti.
Hare Krishna Guru Maharaj, Dandavat Pranam.
You have a powerful name, Ganga Shakti. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. My question is following. We often listen that about the importance of thinking of Krishna at the time of death. However, in some cases, death can come very suddenly in a split second, leaving not much time to think about anything at all. I mean, it happened recently to someone close to me. And that got me thinking, if that would be a devotee, what would happen to the soul? What would be the perspective of such a soul that kind of didn't have time for thinking at the time of death? Sorry if it's a bit of a silly question.
No, it's fine. Yeah, it's a good question. I think that there is an emphasis of thinking of Krishna at the time of death. And I think that typically at the time of death, which for many people is something that approaches gradually, excuse me, there's a lot of impetus to focus to a greater extent on their ideal and so on and so forth, as other opportunities in life have retired and are no longer prospects and so forth. And so there is an emphasis on the end of life kind of status, but really, what we think about at the end of our life is going to be largely dependent on what we think about throughout our life. So there's a accumulated, if you will, state of consciousness, a net accumulation of consciousness at the time of death that determines our future, right? What we'll be thinking about at the time of death, Gita says, that will determine our next life. Yam yam yapi smaram bhavam tejate antika liberam. So regardless of the immediate thought process, if you will, I think more so what the texts are speaking about is a net state of consciousness and awareness that determines our future. By contrast, I think you could say that someone could think of Krishna at the time of death and not get as good of a result as somebody who died suddenly, as in the case of your friend, but had an accumulated net consciousness, Krishna consciousness that was greater. To give you an example, I mean, there are stories of how even thinking indirectly about Krishna at the time of death, as in the case of Ajamil through Nam, of Narayan, he got an extraordinary result. Those emphases are there to emphasize to us the virtues, the power, the importance of Nam, really, in that case. But regardless, as I say, what really the teaching is not the particular thought. You live a sinful life your whole life, and in the last minute you think of Krishna because somebody says, "There's the Hare Krishnas." does that mean you're going to go to Goloka Vrindavan? No. What is the net consciousness that you've attained, if you will? What is the state of your Krishna consciousness, really, which is an accumulation. So, because someone dies suddenly like that, it doesn't mean all the thoughts that they put in previously over their life and the practice and so forth will be in vain. Does that help?
Yes, very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the question.
Okay, there is a question in the chat.
Okay.
Garima? I once read that the Greeks worshipped Krishna in the form of Hercules. It was written that the Greeks visited ancient India, saw the worship of Krishna, went back to their countries, and gave a story similar to Krishna's story. What's your opinion on this?
Yes, that's a factual, historical, if you will, event. There, I think it was what we might call today an ambassador from Greece that went to India and was awed and attracted to and even converted to the worship of Vasudeva. Vasudeva and Sankarshan, Vasudeva and Sankarshan, Krishna and Balaram. These are the Vasudeva, Sankarshan. These are the expansions of Vrindavan, Krishna and Ram for their Mathura and Dwarka Leelas. Through the Mathura and particularly the Dwarka Leelas, they become more famous. They become more widely known, more widely renowned, because they are engaging in Leelas, if you will, that are more attuned to the status of the world, rather than Leelas that are focused exclusively, as the Vrindavan Leelas are, on attaining the Braj-bhava and so forth, exhibiting, showcasing the Braj-bhava. When Krishna goes to Mathura and Dwarka, well, he's establishing Dharma, he's getting rid of Putin, and putting somebody else in charge and so on. So these things get more worldly attention and appreciation. So there were coins at the time with Vasudeva on one side and Sankarshan on the other. Those coins have been found, and there is in Delhi what's it called? I forget the name of it, but there is a pillar, a pillar dedicated to Vasudeva with an inscription on it from the Greek ambassador advocating, glorifying the worship of Vasudeva. Now, Hercules is the Greek god, and I'm not sure exactly what his position is within Greek mythology, but I think he might have been the supreme god. He's like holding up the whole world, right? So there may be some parallel, right, that the Greeks drew between their Hercules and Vasudeva. But of course, if you look at it, there's every reason to appreciate how the Greek ambassador could have been converted, because while you have the underlying philosophical or theological foundations for the god Hercules are lacking considerably, to say the least, in comparison to the philosophical and theological underpinnings supporting the idea of Vasudeva and Sankarshan, Krishna and Ram, as the Godhead. So he had a figure whose life was being celebrated, and in this case, not particularly amongst the cowherds, who are like marginalized people on the fringe of what's happening. They're not in the Big Apple, That's a phrase for New York here in the United States. they're in the cowherd village. Again, what's prominent from a worldly point of view is Krishna's Mathura and Dwarka Leelas and so forth, with their opulence and Aishvarya and so forth. So those are being celebrated, honored, and there's wise people and an abundance of texts also, all giving support to the idea. And so, yeah, he was converted, and he went back to Greece, and he obviously shared his insights. To what extent that caused any further conversions, I'm not sure. But that Heliodorus, it's called Heliodorus, and I think that might have been the name of the ambassador. Heliodorus pillar, for lack of a better name, with the inscription on it. It's there. It's very famous. So yes, there is a historical Krishna, Raman Krishna. Now, my point, of course, is that for sadhakas, a point I raise at times, and I'll re-emphasize it here, for sadhakas, in the early stages of their sadhana, they seek, without realizing they're doing it, objective evidence and to prove the existence of Krishna and his leelas, which is problematic in the long run, because what we find in terms of what the prakat, the manifest leela is, really is the descriptions of Krishna, the historical Krishna, through the meditative mind of Vyas that comes out in the form of Srimad Bhagavatam. So, whatever the historical Krishna was doing, Prabhupada, for example, has times has said that Krishna, not everybody understood that he was God. Well, obviously, if they did, if Duryodhana did, he wouldn't act the way he did. So Premanjana Churita Bhakti Vilochit, with the eyes of love, you can see him. That's true now, and that's true then as well. You could be in the physical, if you will, presence of Krishna, but not recognize him for who he is, because he's not seen with physical eyes, and he's not perceived with physical senses. But there must be a transformation of heart and consciousness. Sevan Mukhi Jivado Swayameva Sparatidha. Attack Sri Krishna Namani, Nama Vijgraham Indri, with the senses, material senses. They're not suitable for perceiving Krishna, for understanding. You might see something. So there may be historical descriptions of the Krishna, which was seen, how he was seen by the naked eye, if you will, which itself was extraordinary. But how he's seen then through the meditation of Vyasa on the implications of his appearance, and how he poetically then explains that in order to emphasize and walk, as I often say, the tightrope between Madhurya and Aishvarya. He's Aishvarya, he's God, but he's acting like an ordinary human. He's weaving that, together in the Bhagavad, particularly in the narrative of the 10th canto. It's very artful. This is the Prakat Leela. It's in the meditative mind of Vyas. The language it's written in is called Samadhi Bhasha. Sanskrit is only the external vehicle, but it's his samadhi has been he's tried to put it into the Sanskrit language and write about Krishna. So that's where we draw the Aprakat Leela from. If we are dependent upon historical facts and so forth, we might find the historical Krishna, but we might not find him lifting over downhill with his little finger of his left hand. What's being said there about him is extraordinary, especially in the main point being the fact that his friends are helping him in that effort. What's being said there? What's the theological implications? That's what's important. The fact that everybody didn't see it or whatever, that's not important. It's what Vyasa is seeing. So, but there are historical, evidences, and some devotees who really need these objective historical facts that Krishna was there. in order to feel secure in their practice, hopefully they'll transcend that necessity, because Krishna himself transcends history. So I hope that helps.
Okay. Sajjan, you have a follow-up question you wanted to ask?
It's not a question. It's just a very brief sharing. Maharaj, I've mentioned to a number of friends over the last few years that apparently there's some evidence, some research was done in the 1960s by scientists, oceanographers in India, and they went down in the water off the coast of Gujarat, and they apparently found some remains from the original Krishna's palace, from the original Dwarka that was flooded by the ocean. And apparently, there's some evidence of that nature there. I just wanted to mention.
Yeah, there are things like that about the bridge of Sri Lanka and so on and so forth. And so, like I say, yeah, there was there historic. He had a celestial, refer to it as such, capital in Dwarka. It was there, and so on and so forth. But Vyasa's not adding something to the story, but drawing something to the story that only can be seen with eyes of love, and he's bringing out the philosophical, theological implications, which is what is important to us. Yeah, okay, I'm just running out of batteries. But I think
Yes.
okay.
Yeah,
All right, are there any other questions?
Yeah, we have a
Thank
few.
you, Sajjan.
We do have a few more questions. Your bandwidth is low. I don't know if there's anything you can do about that.
I'm okay.
You're okay?
Oh.
Okay.
Nothing
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
a battery, but I'm fine.
Okay, because we're seeing you, you're starting to have some problems a little bit. Okay, Omkar,
Dandavat Maharaj, how are you this morning? Can you hear me?
I don't think he can hear you. Do you have your English? Did you click on English?
Dandavat Pranam Maharaj, Maharaj. Okay.
Okay, I can hear you now.
Yes, okay, very good. I guess to segue to that last Bhakti Vilochana comment, I guess what I'm wondering is, in my worship of Sri Murti of Giriraj, if one might kind of see only when his eyes are anointed with the devotion, how he's inconceivably simultaneously Krishna and Haridasvarja, how that comes together. Would it be similarly as we worship Mahaprabhu, or how would one see that? Do you understand?
What you're speaking about is the idea that Giriraj is Krishna and he's also the friend of Krishna, or Haridasvarja, the best servant of Krishna, which is statement from Radha in the 21st chapter of the Bhagavatam Venu Gita. And I think I mentioned it the last time we spoke about this, that Raghunath Goswami and Jiva Goswami played out the idea of Haridasvarja by way of saying that Govardhana serves Krishna in all these different ways, by providing all the 64 items of worship, the mountainous Govardhana, for Krishna, Ram, and their friends and so forth. There's another way, and also to look at Haridasvarja in Rupa Goswami's Dan Keli Leela narrative there. He explains, he sees through the eyes, via his pen, through the eyes of Brindadevi, the Govardhan Hill, as better than Ananta Sage, who has many heads and holds Vishnu in his lap, because Govardhan has many peaks, because he's long and horizontal with many peaks. And not only does he hold Krishna, who's better than Narayan, which was told by the Gargamuni at the time of his birth. If you look at it from the Brajbasi's translation of his statement, if you will, better than Narayan. And Govardhan not only holds him in his lap like an Antasage holds Vishnu, but serves as an entire playground for him. So effectively, Rupa Goswami is seeing Govardhan as better than a better form of an Antasage, which would be Balaram himself, who is Vishnu and who is arguably the best servant of Vishnu, who is Krishna and is a servant of Krishna. Krishna is Bhagavan who is served. Balaram is Bhagavan who serves. So there are different ways to look at that idea, Haridas Varya. But we should worship Govardhan, at any rate, the way in which Chaitanya Mahaprabhu instructed Raghunath Das to worship Govardhan. Worship him as Krishna. And he gives some instructions there. We may modify slightly the details of the instruction, but the spirit of it is to worship him as Krishna, and Raghunath Das did and saw him as not different from Brajendanandan. That said, Raghunath Das has also written some nice prayers glorifying Haridas from the perspective of his being also a servant of Krishna and Balaram. So, there are two sides. One can think about it philosophically, theologically, quote, cite prayers to either affect on either side at any time, and so on and so forth. I wouldn't get confused about it. It's practical to see how Govardhan is such a great servant of Krishna. How is Govardhan Krishna? Well, that's a philosophical perspective, because we understand that Krishna and Krishna's form are one and different. What's the word? Tadatmika? Tadatmika. They're one and different. Krishna and his form. His form is his Swarup Shakti, a manifestation of the Sandhini Shakti, an aspect of the Swarup Shakti, and he's one with his form. And in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Rupa Goswami also says, and Jiva Goswami comments, the Jiva in the same way that Krishna is one with his form, Jiva in the same way is one with the spiritual form, rather than identification with the form, one with the form. It's an interesting point. But at any rate, that's a philosophical perspective, right? The Dham, of which Govardhan is part, the abode, is a manifestation of Krishna's Sandhini Shakti, which is an aspect of his Swarup Shakti. He's one and different from his Shakti. So there's a oneness between the abode of Krishna and Krishna, right? He's non-different from his abode. He's non-different from his form. He's non-different from his devotees. Now, that said, well, we don't worship devotees as Krishna and also as devotees of Krishna. That's true, but we do worship them. But in the case of Govardhan, of course, there's a special incident in the Leela where Krishna assumes the form of Govardhan and speaks to the Brajbasis and says, Anior, Anior. And they've already offered stacks and stacks of chapatis and rice and so forth to appease him, satisfy him. And he's asking, give me more, give me more. Quite an appetite, that fellow. So that is something that he hasn't done, if you will, with the rest of the Dham, shown practically himself to be non-different, although that's the philosophical fact, the truth of the matter. So because of that special event in the context of the Leela, we worship him as Krishna. Perhaps, we can say that a more developed idea of his being the servant of Krishna plays out more readily later stages, as it does for everybody in the Leela. Everybody in the Leela more thinks of Govardhana as a servant of Krishna, and they think of it as him as Krishna, although they've seen that, and that's also there. So for us in the beginning, we should emphasize Govardhana as Krishna. Later, Govardhana as a servant of Krishna may become, take precedence. That's the way I would think about that. Does that help?
Yeah, Guru Maharaj, thank you. That's nice. Yeah, that clarifies the point. Thank you for those points.
Giriraj Govardhan Maharaj. Ki Jai.
Jai.
Okay, we have three questions
That's
from
devotee here.
we have three questions from the Brighton Sangha.
Okay.
So first, Vishnu. Had a
Vishnu,
question.
yeah.
Let me take this off so they can get on the screen.
So this is Vishnu Prabhu has asked me to ask a question. So it was that Gadadhar Pandit, before he became...
We're having a hard time hearing you, Mohini. Can you turn up the sound at all?
I don't know.
No, I can
should I just
hear
try to
you.
speak louder?
Yeah, can
Yeah.
you just...
So Vishnu... Okay, so he's asking who was Gadadhar Pandit's guru before he met Pundarik Vidyanidhi. Is that correct? That's the question from Vishnu Prabhu.
He didn't have a guru yet.
Because when Sri Caitanya-Mahapabhu talks with Gadadhar Pandit, he says, there is this spiritual guide you've always been looking for coming. And in Gadadhar, but before that, Gadadhar Pandit said, the mantra doesn't sit very well in my head, which would suggest that he had been received this mantra before from somewhere.
I don't know if you heard that, okay.
Well, are you referring to the Madhya Leela in Jagannath Puri?
When he first gets taken to meet his guru, he first comes to, but at that time he was saying, the mantra doesn't sit very well in my head. And Sri Caitanya-Mahapabhu says, don't worry, the spiritual guide will come and give you initiation. So that suggests that he'd been given before.
Well, yeah, okay. What book are you referring to?
Chaitanya Bhagavat.
Chaitanya Bhagavat. So before he met Pundarik.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't remember that, but I trust your reference to it. It does seem to imply that what mantra he's talking about, it's hard to say. There's no record that I'm aware of him having a previous guru within Gaudiya Vaishnavism.
That's what I thought, Maharaj. Maybe just a family guru. Maybe just a family guru, I was thinking.
Kula Guru could have been the Brahma Gayatri, which is given to every Brahmin boy, and so forth. Now, what mantras he received from Pundarik Vidyanidhi, that's another thing, probably altogether. So that's the way that I would look at that. Okay.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Yeah. Thank you for your question.
Okay, Radha Devi from the Brighton group.
This is Sri Radha. Hare Krishna. The question I'd like to ask is that it's a personal question. I have great faith and trust in Krishna. I love the association. I'm close to many of the devotees, well, a few of them. And it is my life and soul. There's nothing else is really as important. But as I've got older, I find it far harder to focus, and far harder to chant, and far harder to be as active as I would like to be. So I'd like to ask His Holiness Tripurari Goswami, what would he suggest?
How old are you?
Hare Krishna. How old are you? Oh, I'm 84 this year.
Oh, well, then you're in a special category. Then.
But I feel young inside.
Me too.
I feel young inside.
And I'm 11 years younger than you, so I'm just a child in comparison, practically. But Bhakti-rasa Sindhu, in his own time, refers to devotees over the age of 80 and recommends that because of the physical condition, obviously, and whatnot, mental prowess as well being diminished as they are with age, that standards of practice that were previously expected of them are not to be expected of them, such as strict observance of Ekadasi, or we have another example, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told Haridas Thakur, you're old now, you don't have to chant a certain number of rounds and so forth. So there's some license, if you will, leeway or acknowledgement, a lifetime in service with a body that was suitable for more active, concentrated, whatever, this is for the average devotee, with the change of body, those same active nature and focus and so forth may not be possible, but it's not something to be concerned about. That's understandable. There's a space for that, and despite the fact, the emphasis is that you cannot engage in the ways that you did previously. It will not be to your detriment within bhakti in this life. That's basically what we take from scriptures. Now, if someone becomes a saint and so forth, and in older life is completely fixed and focused, that's another thing. But that would be something for the guru figure. So I hope at 80 I'll be as now, if not more. So does that help at all?
Yes, thank you. And I must say thank you for being here every Sunday with Madame Mahana Mahini. We have a wonderful, wonderful kirtan and prasadam. Hare Krishna.
Bright light.
She looks after.
Bright light and
Sorry,
bright.
she looks after.
Bright light and brighten. So one more question from Brigapad.
Hari Bol Guru Maharaj. I'm working on a book on Vaishnavism, and one thing that I've done is that I've looked at how Vishnu and Vaishnavism is presented in the Vedas, in the epics and in the Puranas and so on. And I just want to check one thing with you, because for me it seems that because they're quite different, these different scriptures and what they say, for example, about Krishna Leela. If I compare like Mahabharata, Harivamsa, Vishnu Purana and Bhagavatam.
Mm-hmm.
But one way of kind of harmonizing them, and this is what I want to check with you, would be to think that there's kind of a gradual revelation, that the earlier texts, they reveal something about Krishna, and then this revelation then kind of finds its apex in the Bhagavatam.
Well,
Is this the way to?
That might have some I want to say some capital in academia, that kind of perspective. Overall, I think that they look at the story of Krishna as being something that's developed over time by votaries and so forth, and it's embellished and so on and so forth. So that would probably be fitting in that kind of a circle. But I mean, you could also look at it from a more spiritual point of view, and maybe that's what you're speaking about. That this is the appearance of Krishna is, or the avatar, in this case Krishna. This is the spiritual manifesting in the material world, and it's an event that, comparatively to other material events, is fathomless in the depth of its implications and so forth, and what can be found out about it, which makes for a religious or theological perspective in which there's new facts to be found out all the time, in contrast to how the scientific community often portrays religion as a static perspective on reality. It's like this, it was said like this thousands of years ago, nothing can change and so forth. Actually, the fact of we're a scientist open, whatever the facts are, we change. Today we say this, tomorrow we may say that, but we're not flip-flopping, we're just moving with the facts as they show themselves. So in the same way that people investigate the material world and it shows itself, why not the event of Krishna's appearance in the world, if we take it to be what we say it is, the avatar concept, the descent of the absolute from beyond time and space, within time and space. Well, how deep can we, to what extent can we plumb the depths of the implications of that? And that's going on. I mean, we look at Caitanya-Carita-Mahakavya, well, we give it the name, the Chaitanya Bhagavat, which is along the same lines of what we're talking about. Here's the Srimad Bhagavatam. Now, here's the Chaitanya Bhagavat. Well, because in the Bhagavatam we find what? That Krishna finds himself indebted to the gopis' love, and he can't pay them back. That's the genesis of Gaur Leela. So there's another, there's the book plays itself out, but then we look back and, we have to have an encore appearance here, or an appendix, the Chaitanya Bhagavat. So that you follow what I'm saying. So I think that that's a good way to look at it and present it. Just, you could do a parallel between how you could look at it academically, just from a material point of view, or you could look at it from a spiritual point of view, how it's developing and new insights are being drawn from it, going forward. Does that help? Yeah.
Yes, thank you.
Okay. Well, that's about all we have time for, I think. I appreciate all the questions, and I hope to be with you again next week.
And just to make an announcement that you will be giving class for Nrsimhadeva Chaturdasi next Saturday, right? Oh, and no, on that's 14th, 2 weeks. Okay.
Then.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna. And if everybody could just stay on for quick announcements. Okay, for the top Vivek classes for next week, for this next month, we have, there's only going to be 3 days that there will be classes. Bhagavad Gita, chapter 5, acting with detachment. That's Ashram Maharaj is giving that on Tuesdays. Shamasundar is giving Gaudiya Vaishnavism in numbers on Thursday. Huh?
Shamananda, not Shamasundar.
Oh, Shamananda, sorry. Thank you, Sakirati. Shamananda is giving class on Gaudiya Vaishnavism in numbers. And that's on Thursdays. And then Indra Nuja is giving classes on Fridays, transition on the journey of the devotee. And then Sundays, questions and answers. So that's the for May. And then, as I said, on the 14th, yeah, it's 2 weeks from. There'll be Guru Maharaj will be giving a special class on Sringadev's appearance day, and that will be at the same time as this call, 11:30 Eastern Daylight Savings Time. Also, I just want to say that we have for the Zoom. We have a Zoom account, and once a year now we've got it set up where we pay for the account, and the account is expensive because of the translation feature. It's about we're paying $2,000 a year for it, which makes it a little cheaper than paying it every month. That payment is coming up. I do have regular donations coming in that pay for about half of it. So we need to raise about $1,000 by the end of the month to be able to pay for the next year. So anyone that is able or inclined to give a donation, I'll put my email address up here. This would be sent to PayPal and archanacity@yahoo.com. And anything anyone could give for that would be wonderful and very helpful. So I think that's it for all the announcements, and thank everybody for your participation and your wonderful questions. We look forward to seeing everyone soon. Hare Krishna.